Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Miss Congeniality. I am beyond thrilled for the guest today. She is a best selling author, she is a mental health advocate. She is known best for her debut book, Buy Yourself the Fucking Lilies, which you guys all know because I recommend it nonstop. She has another book coming out called Glow in the Fucking Dark. She has 1 bazillion accolades from her first book. And before that, she worked in TV, which I did not know. She was the VP of Talent and Development at Comedy Central, and obviously that means I like her even more than I already did. So, everybody, please welcome this week's guest. Hello, how are you? Feel free to introduce
Hi.
yourself if I didn't do a good
Yeah.
enough job.
No. Oh my God. I felt like a little blushy during your intro. I was like, oh, that sounds like a cool person.
Yeah, you're like, who's that?
Who's that person? I'm Tara Schuster. And yeah, those are all the things. That's basically my life story. Those are the things that happened. And here I am today.
I feel like I know you because of reading the book, but I have to tell you, and for those of you who don't know what this is, when you're pitching any sort of like thing, like a book, a TV show, a movie, you have to present comps, which are just like comparative pieces of like whatever it is that you're pitching that would be a similar genre or give a similar vibe because it just gives like an editor or publisher a good idea of what it is. And you are one of the comps for my book. And so
Oh,
this is like very full circle because I read Buy Yourself the Fucking Lilies when we started the proposal process with my book, and it ended up being one of the comps that we presented to publishers. So in a
ah,
way, I feel like I look up to you so much. I'm
oh,
such a
I'm
fan.
totally flattered. And it's so funny because that whole process sucks so hard. Like
Yeah.
the proposal process is not a fun one. And it's my process was so I found it difficult. It took me 9 months to come up with basically you come up with like a 10-page document that explains to publishers like here's what it's gonna be. Mine took 9 months, 9 months of pain. I wrote 100 pages and like I just thought no one was gonna buy it and
Yeah.
this was gonna be the end of the story. So it's so crazy to me to hear that you used that my book exists, first off, blows my mind. Second off, that it was a comp for you is insane. So thank you for letting me know that.
Yeah, no, I'm obsessed. I know the listeners are obsessed as well. But before we get into like your illustrious career and all the things, I wanted to ask you the icebreaker that I ask all of my guests that I have on. I just think it's a fun question, gets to know you a little bit better. So the question is, what is your fatal flaw?
Oh God, I spent a lot of hours crying about this morning.
It's okay
It's
if it's like I like
like a
junk food, you know?
multi. No, let me just give it to you. We're here. Let's just do
Yeah,
this. Let's
let's just
just
do
dive
it.
in. Okay. My fatal flaw is that I am such a perfectionist
Mm,
to the point where it's actually okay for me. I'm actually okay being a perfectionist in my own life, but it drives everyone around me insane
okay, yeah.
because they're like, dude, that's not my sense of urgency. You need to let go. You need to calm down. And I'm like, calm down. You try to
I
calm
don't want to
down.
calm down.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so it's gotten me where I am. I think that like relentless hustle and trying to do everything with excellence, and it might be my downfall because I can't let go enough to trust other people to do things.
That makes a lot of sense. Actually, we were making fun of my brother's girlfriend because I did an episode with the two of them. And when I asked them that, she said it was like her incessant use of Google Calendar and like the need for everything to be so perfect and organized. And I was like bullying her because I was like, dude, that's not a fatal flaw. Like, you just come on here and be like, I'm so organized. Everything needs to be perfect. And she was like, no, but it becomes a problem in my relationships because then my boyfriend is like, get a grip. And by get a grip, I mean
Totally.
stop having a grip. Like, for once, just like let go. So I feel like it's
Totally.
a lot of times when we over perfect a really good quality, it can become a flaw, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
I mean, truly mental breakdown this morning because I hurt somebody that I love with my perfectionism. Like this
Yeah.
really isn't like I went into a job interview and they asked like, what's your biggest flaw? And I'm like, I'm just too good at my job. Like,
Yeah.
no, this like drives people who love me away from me. And so it's something that, I don't want that. So I definitely am working on it.
Okay, well that was a good one. Thank you for that. That
Yeah.
I think a lot of people can relate to. But before we get into all of your writing success, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about like being a woman in television and entertainment and specifically in comedy television and entertainment. Can you speak to your experience a little bit because I had no idea like the breadth of experience that you had doing that. Like I obviously knew you did it because I read the book, but I really like want to hear from you, like sitting in front of me, what that was like, because I feel like it couldn't have been easy.
No, it couldn't have been. It
Yeah.
was, yeah. It's so, in a lot of ways, I had it extremely lucky. I worked at Comedy Central for 1/3 of my life. And I became so identified with the job that people would introduce me to our Schuster, Comedy Central, like it was my married last name. Like
Yeah.
my job was my identity. And in comedy, there's like one show in particular that I'm thinking of where there was something like 18 male EPs and me in the room. And I'm like the senior executive, but I'm also like early 30s. These guys have all been in the business for a long time. And it's this interesting weirdness of like, okay, I'm in charge of your show on behalf of the network. I want to work with you all. But, one thing that comes to mind is I was once in a meeting with all of them and it was post show and there was a rape joke in the show. And so they
Ugh.
all turned to me like about the rape joke. Like, did it go too far? Like, I was like, you can't figure this out for yourself. Like, the thing you want my opinion on is just the rape joke.
Yeah.
And, no one, a lot of those dudes really helped me in my career. And I I got a lot of opportunities a lot quicker than my colleagues. I think because I was such a hustler. So it's just wild because everything has changed so much. Like I even remember in before the pandemic hearing from a manager that the reason they couldn't hire any women on a show is because there weren't funny women. And
Mm.
that's like literally 2019, November of 2019, real life really said so there was a lot of problems. There's a lot of problems across the board, a lot of good things too, but I just think people thought they could like I don't even want this to become about this, but like they could touch me, they could,
Yeah.
like put a hand on my thigh and like that was okay. And
Yeah.
then it was just weird because I was supposed to be in charge. So it was like this
Yeah.
really weird thing.
I often get that way. Like I hear that so loudly because I often get that way like around any like man who's older than me. I always feel like naturally they're the authoritative figure and I'm not, and I'm like a
Yes.
small thing that needs to be taken care of. So sometimes when someone like puts a hand on me, which I hate, even
Yeah.
women, anybody, I don't like being touched. I don't even really flinch. I just, like, have accepted that that's, like, okay, and then I, like, reflect on it and I'm like, "That made me so uncomfortable." Like, in what world is that okay?
It wasn't until sort of the end of my time at Comedy Central where I started hanging up the phone on people. Like I realized my power. I was like, wait a minute, this agent cannot talk to me this way. I'm just hanging up. Like
Yeah,
I didn't. It took a while, and I think when you're young and put in a position of power, you're also so scared
yeah,
because you feel like you owe them so much. Like I felt like I owed my mentors so much. So who was I to like say anything was
mhm,
wrong ever? Like I should just keep it to myself. And really that is not healthy. That actually is a quid pro quo. Like trading
yeah.
your self-respect for moving up the ladder more quickly. So yeah, it was tough. It was beautiful. I love comedy. And it was shocking that some of the stuff you like
Yeah.
hear as like an anecdote about Hollywood, it was shocking that some of it was true.
Was actually true. So,
Yeah.
based on, like, those experiences, do you have, like, major lessons that you took away from being forced to navigate a space like that? And does it reflect in your life now? Like, do you feel like you've reclaimed sort of, like, your power and your agency?
Yeah, it's actually a really funny lesson that I learned. So I worked on Key and Peele. I worked on it from the pilot, though I was in the digital space first, and then I became the executive in charge of the show years later. And Keegan and Jordan, the way they treated everybody from top to bottom was so kind, like
Mm,
an example of how any of us should treat any of us in any circumstance, much less Hollywood. And what I realized was that even if their show was on the bubble or the network had a problem with it, they always got what they wanted because they had been so nice. Like the whole
yeah,
time they'd just been so pleasant to work with. And so my major lesson was everybody's a human in your workplace. The humans that kind of advance the most are the ones that are the most giving. And that doesn't mean that they didn't stand up for themselves. And that doesn't mean, if they got a bad note on a sketch, it wasn't like they just rolled over, but it was their general demeanor was just
Right.
so kind. And that's the biggest lesson I took away was be kind to everybody. You're not better than anybody. Like truly everybody matters.
Yeah, I love that. Do you ever consider going back into TV, or are you like, I'm a writer woman now and I'll be staying here?
Well, Lily's, I can't like fully talk about it, but there was a TV situation and
Okay.
hopefully there will be a TV situation again. I would go in as a TV writer,
Okay.
but I kind of like felt like I did it. Like at the end of Comedy
Yeah.
Central, I was like, well, I've done this now. So,
No,
and it was
I love it.
awesome.
I
Yeah.
love it. Yeah, no, I feel a similar way. Like, I feel like once you drop into like the books of it all, you're kind of like, oh, this is where I was always meant to be.
The day I sold my book was the day that this like I had this anxiety that was always itching under my skin the whole time I was at Comedy Central. Even when it was awesome, there was something that was just off. And the day I sold my first book, it just vanished.
Oh my God.
Vanished. And I was like, oh, because this is the right thing for me. Like, aha,
Yeah.
I'm not like trying to fit myself into something
Yeah,
else.
you're like, I feel better now.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's such a breath of fresh air. Well, you kind of gave me the perfect segue because I wanted to talk about your first book deal and the process of getting that. And like, was this something that you always wanted? Because I know a lot of my listeners are aspiring writers, and I try to bring on authors a lot because I felt personally, and this is like no fault of anyone's except for maybe the publishing industry, like there is no there's no guidelines for what you're supposed to do. Like I remember before my agents reached out to me, I was like, okay, so I know that if I want to write books, I have to have an agent, but like, where do I find them? And like,
Right.
how do I get them to want to talk to me? And like, and then what? And then I have friends who are fiction authors who are like, well, I had to write a whole manuscript before I even got
Oh,
an agent. So I'm
much
like,
worse.
much worse, much worse. So I'm like, what was your process of having your first book deal and what was that like?
Yeah. So, I always wanted to be a writer. I went to Brown for playwriting, actually. I thought I was going to be a playwright, moved
Yeah,
to New
me too.
York. Oh,
I studied
literally?
playwriting also. Yeah, at
Oh,
Michigan.
funny. Oh, amazing. So, you know this. So,
Yeah.
I like study. I'm like, oh, I'm going to be a playwright. I moved to New York. I'm working at the Public Theater, which is like
Ah,
arguably,
the
the
best.
the best. And people are, eating soup from cans exclusively. Like nobody has health insurance. It's a mess. And I pretty quickly realized like I don't have this in me.
Yeah.
Bless, this is amazing. All these people can do this. I struggled so much in my childhood and had so much financial trauma and just, abuse, neglect, the whole nine that I was like, I can't live this with this amount of instability.
Yeah.
So I went over. That's when I started working at the Daily Show with Jon Stewart. That
Mm,
was an internship that was just available. But writing, so that's just to say that writing had always been something I really wanted to do.
mm,
And at Comedy Central, what I did was I kept writing. Like I always had a play in the Fringe Festival.
mhm.
I, submitted stuff to the New Yorker. The way Lily's came about was, that whole book basically, I was really successful on the outside, like, woohoo, I'm climbing this ladder. Inside, I was imploding. I was self medicating with weed and booze and boys and self hatred and just a disaster until it was my 25th birthday when I drunk dialed my therapist, threatening to kill myself.
Mm,
And the next morning, I was so ashamed and realized if I don't fix my life, I'm not going to have much more of a life to live.
mm.
And so I realized I need to be my own parent. Like I need to step in. I need to stop the neglect. Had no idea how to do that. But, you're talking about your friend with the Google sheet. I was like, I know what I'll do. I'll start a Google Doc and I'll put all the questions I have. What are values? What are principles? What are vegetables? Genuinely, what are they? Which one should I be eating? And I'm just going to make my own curriculum here.
Yeah.
And I did that for 5 years, felt like a totally different person. That's 5 years of writing. At the end of that
Yeah.
process, I had 600 pages. So, my first thing to any writer is live your life. Like, which sounds maybe that's not obvious. In Hollywood, a lot of writers, they start so early that they actually don't have much lived experience to talk about.
Mm.
And then it kind of like the well runs dry because most of writing is you're pulling from yourself, even if it's fiction.
Yeah.
Um, and and just write, like write, 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 write. the number one thing when a young writer comes to me and says, not a young writer, I'm not like, stepping into my grave. A writer, when a writer, I'm like acting like I'm so old.
Yeah.
Um, like a writer will come to me and say, I need to get an agent. I need to get a this. And I'm like, well, have you written anything?
Like,
No.
what are you writing? Yeah.
So the very first and foremost is write a lot, write a sample that's good enough for anybody to care about. Um, because the agent, the manager, whatever, they're not going to just give it to you unless you're in a very particular situation. They're going to want to see something regardless to decide
Yeah.
whether or not they want to rep you. So you need a really good sample of in whatever medium you want to work in. And I got lucky that my agent was a friend of a friend,
Mm.
and she sort of saw some potential and decided that she would work with me on for those 9 months to write that proposal. So I didn't have to like go pitch myself to a million agents. She was the first one I talked to. She was into it. I was like, I don't want to talk to anybody else. But the key, I think this is like very hopeful. The key is to write.
Yeah.
That's first and
No,
foremost.
I 100% agree with you. Like, I resonate with your 600 pages so much because, well, I don't have 600 pages. I have like 3,000 phone notes. And when I was writing my debut, I was like, thank God I
Yeah.
fucking wrote this shit down. Like, I wrote down like a whole entire notes journal entry about how I went to this guy's apartment for like a fourth date. And he was like, you don't have to wear that much makeup around me. And just how like fucking weird that made me feel
Oh
because
my God.
I'm an insecure person, but I also like makeup as self-expression and like also like it made me feel like I don't know, like it was like the weirdest experience, but I had a whole note app that I would have forgotten that. It was like years
Yeah.
ago. That I was like, "Oh my God, I read every single note in my phone notes and like all my journals when I was writing my book." And I was like, "I am like in love with my younger self for doing this."
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
didn't even realize I was, but that advice, I write everything down. Like when
Oh,
something
yeah.
happens, it's written down because I don't know if my book would be what it is without those notes in the fucking notes app, which sounds crazy because it's the notes
No,
app.
it makes sense because it's you again, you have to live your life and pay attention to your life because those all those details are what makes your voice, what makes it unique to you. Like, why are you the only person who can write that? So
Yeah.
it's paying attention to what's happening. I really recommend journaling for literally everything, for mental
Yeah.
health, for creativity. And so that 600 pages, I didn't have to like make anything up. I had written it all down.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I'm kind of curious, like when you think back on that night when you drunk dialed your therapist and like had the breakdown, you probably weren't thinking like this is going to become my best-selling book and like my whole life. Like, do you look back on that? Obviously not fondly because it's like rock bottom. Like, how are you looking back on rock bottom fondly? But like, is there a sense of gratitude or like, can you speak to your emotions around reflecting on rock bottom when rock
Yeah.
bottom is the reason why you're like so successful?
Yeah, it's a really good question and it's a complicated answer, which is I would much rather have a happy, stable family and have no book to write
Mm,
than the opposite. Like I would trade places in a heartbeat with somebody else.
yeah,
And this is what happened to me and it's my own story and I wanted to make meaning of it and I didn't want to suffer in silence because I knew I couldn't be the only person who felt this way. And so I have found a lot of community in, even like my Instagram or my newsletter. People are like, oh my God, I went through the same thing. Like maybe not the same details, but the like exact emotional thing that you went through. So for me, it's grief and gratitude. I always try to hold those two at the same time. I'm so grateful for this career. I'm so grateful. This is like the job I was born to do. And I grieve that I never got to be the little girl I could have been. I grieve
yeah,
not having a stable family. It's both and.
yeah. And I think it shows when you say this is what you were always meant to do, like through your writing, like even the first few chapters of Lily's, like they just shine. Like it
Hmm.
seems so, I don't know, like you were meant to hold the pen and write the story.
Oh,
And like
thank you.
I'm I love what you said about grief and gratitude because I feel like a lot of people forget that two things like are allowed to be true at once, even if they're polar opposites.
Yeah, I basically, for my own mental health, being able two things. Being able to discern between the truth and a belief really helped me, like, because I believed I was worthless and ugly and no one was ever going to love me and no one was going to take care of me and I was doomed at 25. Like, I thought, like, my career's doomed. I believed all that. None of it was true.
Yeah.
So over time, I've become increasingly good at seeing the difference between a negative belief and the truth, and then that nothing is black and white. Like, even in a terrible situation, there's stuff to be grateful for.
Mm.
Even in a, like, they're just all these things are true at the same time. And I don't need to have a yes, no, black and white, anything.
Yeah, I love that. So, pivoting a little bit to like you as writer, can you speak to your writing process a little bit? People ask me this a bunch and I don't know if I have something concrete, but I have preferences and it always cracks me up when people have completely different like times and modes of creativity. What
Oh,
is your
yeah.
writing process?
You could not have asked me a question that I would more love to answer because I love process. Huge fan of process.
She's a
Um,
process girl.
I'm a process girl from way back when. Um, well, my process starts with my environment. Like, I have a little pink office that is perfectly suited to me. And when I can't write in my little pink office, I have like a little go bag that has washi tape, a pretty fountain pen, little things that just always make me feel a little more comfortable.
Mhm.
So I always have something that gives me comfort. And I wake up. So when I was at Comedy Central, I woke up and first thing I did was I started to write, and I wrote an hour a day before work for like 3 years, and then I'd write all the weekends and at night I wouldn't see friends. I mean, to get a book out and also have that full time job was a little crazy.
Yeah.
Um, but now what it is I wake up, I meditate, I journal, and then I set a timer for an hour and just do an hour of free writing. And it's the same process. It's a big Google Doc that I don't know where it's going, but I know I'll find nuggets in it eventually. Um, and it's always in the morning though. I cannot write in the afternoon or nighttime. Like, it's just
Mhm.
I'm stupid by then. I drained. So
Yeah.
always morning.
Oh, I like that. I feel like for a while I had this pressure. I think I read like once that like Toni Morrison would get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and write for from 4 to 5 every single day. And I was like, I need to wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning to be a good writer.
No.
But I feel like everyone's process is so different, which is like sort of the beauty of it. It's like,
Yeah, yeah, and, like, just protecting it, like, so if you wanna have a morning practice, that means you can't schedule other things there, you have to, like, protect your time, you really in my experience, you have to be protective of your process.
I love that. And I guess then, in terms of writing about really dense topics and like writing about trauma and like unearthing that, how do you get through that? Because I think, even in my experience, like writing about the worst things that have happened to you, like even if you feel like you've made peace with it, you don't realize how like difficult it will be to open a wound again and again and again and again and again.
Yeah, I mean, it's real. I the way I try to write about my life is like a novel. Like, I want you to be there with me. I want you to feel the emotions I was feeling. I want to paint you the whole picture. I really try to show, not tell, even though, it's like a memoir slash self-help.
Mm,
And that is really, really difficult. And every single time I do it, I have to relive the trauma. It is traumatizing in itself. And it's the only possible way to get it done. I had an author say to me, well, I could write the story, but those moments where I have to talk about my trauma, they just bum me out too much. I'm like, well, that's the job.
yeah,
I mean,
that's
I
the
don't know what
job
else to tell you.
description. Yeah.
Like, yeah, so it's not pleasant, and I'm always glad that I did it. And I try to treat myself
Mm,
like a little kid recovering from surgery, like candies, and now I'm
yeah.
gonna lie down, and I get to take a nap now. I just try to treat myself gently, and remember, this is not 5-year-old me. This is mid-30s, have my shit together, me choosing to write. Like, I'm not
Yeah.
overwhelmed by this.
No, I 100% resonate with that, and I love the treat system. I feel like it's
Yeah.
just a helpful way to be like, "I'm taking care of myself, like, I'm okay, like, almost like coaxing yourself. Like it's incredibly
Oh
helpful.
yeah.
You have to do that, or else what do you have? Do you have like
I
a
live by that.
you have like a go-to for like your favorite treat or like treat yourself thing that you like to have or do?
Yeah, it's always a massage. That
Okay.
like in LA there are all these like Thai spas or Chinese foot spa. Like they're like literally everywhere. So
Yeah.
it's not necessarily like a fancy day at a
A
fancy
spa,
spa,
yeah.
though I wouldn't kick that out of bed. I'll definitely love a spa day.
Yeah.
But, a more reasonable, like, oh, this isn't going to cost so much that I'm really going to care, but oh, wow, is it going to feel so good? That's
Yeah.
definitely my treat.
Okay, I love that. I think I always like get guilty with self-care sometimes, but when you walk away from it, you're like, now I can do it again. Now I can write another chapter. Like I care for
Yeah.
myself. It's like a give
Yeah.
and take.
And my ultimate like, what I try to say to people about why self-care is not selfish and like, if what we're talking about is you go to an island, Hawaii, alone and you enjoy it and that's your self-care, yeah, I don't know. That's like I wouldn't say that's like for the community's benefit, but if you take a real accounting of your emotional wounds and bring yourself the nurturing that you need to get to health, you are a part of your community. And we
Mm,
are stronger if the whole community is doing well. And so, the really self care, when done right, is always community care.
mm.
You cannot separate the two. And so, I really, every time I hear it, I encourage people to say, like, or to ask, like, well, am I a part of, do I have any friends? Do I have anybody I love? Might I accidentally be acting in ways that is not amazing to them because I have some unresolved stuff? And like, wouldn't it be a treat for them if I got on this? So yeah, I'm just on like a lifelong mission to be like treating your mental health as precious is good for all of us.
Yeah, you're so right. I never thought about it like that, but like when you prioritize your own self-care, then like your romantic partner, your friends, like any person that comes in contact with you and loves you on a day-to-day basis, like your relationship is going to be stronger because of it.
Yes, they benefit.
Yeah, that's awesome. Wow, that just really reframed my mindset there. um, so I want to talk about glow in the fucking dark and the excitement around it. Can you just kind of like elevator pitch it to us? Tell us a little bit about it and how is it different from Lily's and kind of what you're excited about?
Yeah. So after Lily's, I was on this good enough plateau. Lily's is a book of rituals that I used to like find stability and contentment. Two things I thought were never going to happen for me because I grew up in this neglectful, psychologically abusive house where things came to die. And the only thing, like, I exited my childhood just believing I was worthless.
Mm,
And I needed to do all of the work of Lily's just to feel like, oh, I'm worthy because I was born. Like I'm a soul in
yeah,
a body. That's something, you
yeah.
know? And so I'd done all this work. I was the most mentally healthy I'd ever been. And I was unceremoniously let go from Comedy Central, just
Mm,
like laid off, top of the pandemic.
yeah,
And it was a major problem, not only because being laid off obviously sucks, but because I had attached all of my worth to that job.
mm,
It was look over here. I'm hanging out with Jordan Peele and David Spade. And like, I'm not a weirdo who had a childhood nobody can relate to. Like, I'm good. Distract, distract, distract. Let's not talk about this 25 years of complex trauma that I have not addressed yet. And it, without the job, all of it kind of came out because I no
yeah,
longer had that to hold me together. And so you'd think I'd stop and reflect for like 1 minute. No. Whenever I'm in a crisis, my go-to is go, 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 go. Achieve, woman, like get more. So
yeah.
I decided I need like a big cause. It was the 2020 election. So I Googled, how can I help in the 2020 election? Basically the first search result was you can register voters in Arizona. Just like that, I grabbed my Vitamix, I grabbed a bag of books I would never crack open. I moved to Arizona. I was
Oh my
like,
God, you were like, I'm out.
I'm out. I was like, peace be with you. I'm going and I'm going to be
Yeah.
important and really do something. And on the road to Arizona, I had the worst dissociative episode of my life
Mm.
it was like I could see my hands, I could see my like shoddy self-done manicure and my rings, but they were floating above the steering wheel. Like nothing was attached to me.
Oh,
And I was like speeding and feeling really, really out of control. And for the first time in my life, it occurred to me, I need to pull over. I cannot overwhelm myself through my life. This feels like sandpaper on the soul. This doesn't work and I don't have it in me. So for the first time ever, I pulled over and it just so happened that I was in the desert so you could really see the stars shine at night. You know, in LA,
yeah.
it's like never. But here you could really see it. And I wondered, can I shine like that? Like stars come together because they're like mixed up and mashed up and there's pressure and there's nuclear reaction and it's not like a pretty process to become a star. And so I just
Yeah.
wondered if those stars shine even in this bleak bleak time, do I have that in me? And it was particularly resonant because we are made of stars. You know,
Mm.
not in some cutesy way that I'm going to like draw on a mug. You know, it's not, it's not like a like poster for my office. The carbon in your muscles, the iron in your blood, it's star dust. It is from the stars. And
Mm.
so I was like, well, if I have that in me, like I know I have that in me scientifically, how do I pull it out? How do I pull out that shine? And that's what the book is all about is how do you find your most essential self, grow your most essential self, and then let it out, let it glow.
I love that. That is so exciting. I can't wait to read the book. I'm so curious, like, what are the big differences between the two? And maybe even just like how you feel about them.
Yeah. So Lily's basically is a way to center your life and give yourself structure. That's what I needed. I had been so wildly out of control and just felt so bad about myself that that whole book is about stability and getting to like even ground. And
Mm.
and then Glow is I was on even ground. I was the most mentally healthy I'd ever been, and I think for that reason these dark things in me felt like they could come out because for the first time
Yeah.
ever I could handle them, you know,
Mm.
as painful as
Yeah.
it was.
Yeah. I love that too. That's really beautiful because it's like, I feel like sometimes when you're going through like a healing process or just working on yourself in general, the surface stuff is really easy. Like, okay, like maybe it's hard to extract, but like, okay, it's right there. I'll grab it all. But then once you grab all that, you've laid down probably like so much concrete over like the deepest shit that then you have to like
Yeah.
become a bulldozer and like take all that down. And you're like, wow, I've been better than I ever am, but now there's still all this other shit that I didn't address yet.
Yeah. And the concrete helps because you can remember like, "Oh, I can get back to stable ground." Like, I don't need to be like 10 out of 10 anxious all the time. I
Yeah.
and what I really learned was to treat myself gently. You know, I think people wanna rush through healing. They wanna go at healing the hardest they can and reject parts of them. Like, I reject my anxiety. I don't want my depression. Like, I want those things to go away. And what I realized is you can't hate your way to health. You can't reject yourself to self acceptance. You actually have to take all those parts of you and love and accept all of them. And that's the shortcut to healing. So ultimately, Glow is about diving deep, doing soul level work, believing that you can and living a life that you want. That's not just for me, my life was a reaction to trauma until that point. I was just constantly playing emotional whack-a-mole, like responding to things that happened when I was 5, in real time now as an adult. And so I just wanted to free myself. I wanted to liberate myself from those past wounds. And that's what I hope it helps readers do.
I definitely think it will. I am so beyond excited, but I'm curious from your perspective, like when you're getting all of this praise and reception, like from Lily's, and now like I'm sure it's like you're anticipating that all again. How does it feel to have like Chelsea Handler and Glennon Doyle say like I fucking loved this. Like I literally would fall over. Like I can't imagine what that feels like.
Yeah, again, this was part of my meltdown today. It's almost impossible to accept. It's
Yeah.
like I never ever, ever, ever am like, wow, I really did a thing. I'm like, shit, I really need to work harder to
Mm,
get to like this next level. And, that's a part of my fatal flaw is like, nothing's ever good enough. I've got to keep going. And I myself am really working on that. Because, of course, like Glennon Doyle said about my next book, the first sentence of her blurb is Tara Schuster is a phenomenal storyteller. Oh my god, wait, what? On what planet does
I
she
would
even know who I
die.
am?
I
Yeah,
would
like,
die.
how is this happening? And I just wanna,
Yeah.
like, put that on my clothing everywhere, just
But yeah.
everybody see it. So
Yeah.
I really I go back and forth, like, sometimes I can feel it, sometimes I really can't, but if I really could feel it all the time, I think I'd be the most atrocious friend. You would not wanna hang out with me. Like, the person who totally believes they're the shit is
Yeah.
probably, I think there's a little something to having some humility about,
Yeah.
all this.
Yeah, no, you're 100% correct. I feel like even, like, when I'm booking podcast guests or anything, like, when you said you'd wanna be on my podcast, I was like, "Why does she want that?" Or, like, I have someone else coming on my podcast in a few weeks, and I was like, "I actually don't even think I can sit down and do that. Like, why would she want to?" And it's just, like, sometimes you have to also realize, like, you deserve that. Like, that she said that about you.
Yeah.
Glennon said that about you because you are a phenomenal storyteller. And even if you don't believe it
Thank
in this
you.
moment, like, she does. That's
It
something I would
if
remind
if
myself
you
every time I
can
felt like shit.
That is so powerful because even when you're describing, like, I wanted to be on your podcast. Like, it's true. Like, I wanted to be. Like, if you can trust the other people around you a little bit to,
Yeah,
not everything should come from external validation, but if you can't trust yourself and the outside world is telling you, hey, I think you're pretty good, kid. Generally you can trust the outside world because
yeah,
nobody's nice.
yeah.
Nobody's like
Nobody's yeah,
trying to,
yeah,
like pump you up. So
yeah. On the other end of it, like, do you read reviews in general? And if you've ever had to face any sort of criticism or backlash, like, or negativity, like, what does your process look like for handling that?
well, I don't read anything.
Yeah, I fe
So,
no,
I don't wanna read the
I'm in that camp. I'm not.
yeah. I don't wanna read the good, I don't wanna read the bad. The only time I read anything is if, the my publicist or the publisher is like, "Hey, man, you need to read this," then I would read it. But so that's also means I don't know the criticism. I have no
Mm,
idea. So far, knock on wood, I haven't had, like, a backlashy moment. I mean,
yeah,
I think partially because 'cause I'm just saying, like, this was my life.
yeah.
Like, I'm like, I'm not an
What can
expert.
they
I'm not in
say? Yeah,
anything. Yeah, like, this is just my lived experience, and I don't claim anything else, but, I don't wanna jinx myself, and I don't want Glow to, like, totally backfire, and I'm, like, canceled and,
no, no, no.
like, scuttling for a job,
No,
I don't
no.
wanna invite that upon myself.
No, yeah, that's not gonna happen. I've heard, like, a lot of actors specifically, I don't know why but I've heard them say, like, "I do not read reviews of my movies. I do not need to know. Like, that is an opinion I did not ask for. I am surrounded by
Yeah,
experts on a day-to-day basis whose job it is to tell me when I'm not doing a good job." Like, or whose job it
that's
is
a
to tell
great
me
way to
when I
put it.
am. And when I heard an actor say that, I was like, because I was getting so phenomenally anxious, like to the point of that I couldn't even write thinking about reviews. And then I was like, why do reviews
Mm,
matter? And then I listened to Cheryl Strayed on a podcast, and she was like, when the minute that I stopped trying to become a bestseller is when I started writing like one because I just stopped caring. It was just like, this book is the only book I
yeah,
can write right now, and I like it. And so who the fuck else cares? And I was like, yeah, that's
yeah.
true. That's true.
The the way I feel when I'm writing, the challenge is can I write to the top of my excellence? Like, can I leave
Mhm.
it all out on the field? And if so, I'm really proud of myself. Like that's the standard I'm holding myself to cuz you really can't guess what people are going to think. Like I pray to God people like this next book, but I didn't write it with like the desperation of people needing to like it in my mind. I wrote it because I
Yeah,
knew it was true and I knew it was the thing I had to say.
I love that. That's yeah. I think that once I let go of perception, it just also came easier. It's easier to be creative when you're doing it
Yeah.
because it's just your story. So
Yeah, and when you yeah,
no, no, go
totally.
ahead. Um,
Oh,
okay,
I was
so
just
I
gonna
have
say, like
go for it. Sorry. I was just like kept
no, no,
interjecting.
you go. You go.
No, 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 you first, because I was really just gonna ask you some more questions that followers gave me, but I want to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, just that like expectations are really not helpful for like I'm guilty of it in the marketing of Glow. Like I really wanted it to be successful. It's not even out yet. And I want it to be successful and I want it to be these things and I can feel a pressure on my brain when I'm thinking
Mhm.
that way as opposed to well the whole reason I wrote it was to make people feel less alone and to just show them they have agency. Just like you have way more power than you think you do. You can change almost everything if that's what you want. That's why I wrote it, not so that, a reviewer in the New York Times can tell me if I'm good or not. So the
Yeah.
expectations, I really try to throw those away too when I'm writing.
Yeah, that's a good reminder for all of us in any field doing anything. Just chuck the expectations out the door because then you'll blow past your
Yeah,
own even. So
totally.
I have two questions that my followers gave that I thought were really good and fun that I wanted to ask you. And so the first one is, do you ever or have you ever throughout this whole process ever found or find yourself straying from your own advice and what do you do to like get back with it? If so.
Oh, yeah, constantly. Yeah, oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. I get lost all the time. I lose self-care habits, I start thinking I suck, I act in a way that has no gratitude at all, but the thing is, like, you don't need a perfect score in self-care. Like, nobody's asking that of you, and you can't win at, being the best at your mental health, and part of the process is getting lost because every time you get lost and you realize, haha, the reason this whole week is sucking is because I'm not journaling and you get found, it just becomes easier and easier and easier. So
Mm,
the difference between then and now is, yeah, I get lost from time to time. I don't criticize myself about it. That's just part of the process. And I can easily come back to my habits. Whereas before, I would criticize myself and then it would take longer to start doing it and just feel a lot of negativity about it.
also, when your habits are like scripture, like yours are, or like when your methods are like that, when like you know them so deeply, when you fall off of the horse, it's not like the horse like ran 25 miles away. Like it's probably just around the corner.
Totally.
And so it's
Totally. And
more
to have patience
tangible.
with yourself.
Yeah,
Totally.
that's great. So the second one is, who are you outside of your books? Like I loved this question because I want to know like what is like your favorite thing to do? Like what are your guilty pleasures? Like what is your favorite food? Like what kind of stuff do you do on the weekends? Like who are you outside of these books? Because we love these books. We love you as a writer, but we also love you as a person.
Oh, it's a great question because I'm definitely showing you like one side of me, in the books.
Mhm.
Um, I love hiking. I love being in nature. Trees are my favorite people of all time. So I was in Seattle doing a speaking gig and I was just like, I've got to be in a forest. So I found like a ferry that could take me to an island where I could just be alone with a bunch of moss. Like
Yeah.
that's really where I feel my best is in nature. And at the same time, I want a diamond collar necklace. Like I
Yeah.
am both those things all the time. And I would say that maybe one thing that's not obvious is like what a romantic I am and like what a like because I'm usually pretty cynical about trying anything and I think it's going to be BS and it's not going to work for me. Like that's my factory setting is cynicism. And I'm like super optimistic and want to find love and really want to love my friends and that's the kind of thing that fills up my cup.
Yeah, that's I feel like also that just makes you like even just telling me that you love being outside, like now I picture like such a different like piece of who you are,
Yeah, yeah,
which
and
is
it's definitely grown too. Like now I started off as a hardcore indoor kid, so the fact that I went to an island to chill with moss, surprising to me,
yeah,
honestly.
you surprised yourself.
Yeah.
Do you have favorite books, TV shows, movies, things that you come back to that are your all-time? Favorites.
Yes. Since you said you have a lot of writers who listen, Julia Cameron's The Artist Way is
Okay.
the number one reason I was able to write any book whatsoever.
Okay.
It is a 12-step program towards recapturing your creative self for people who had been told you're not allowed to write. You'll be poor if you write, or any kind of art, any artistic endeavor. Um, that book gave me such healing, so many tools, and that's how I began, was by doing that book. I've done that book like 6 times. It's a workbook. So that's my number one. Everybody should read it and do it. My number two would actually be Cheryl Strayed, Tiny Beautiful Things,
It's the best book
which
on the planet of the whole world on
oh my
earth
god, it's
in every
incredible.
like, I am actually obsessed with her, like, to a point where, like, when she followed me on Instagram, one time I was talking about, on my podcast that she followed me on Instagram, and I was like, "Wait, I don't check if she still follows me." Like, it's been a year now, and I have my listeners check. I'll be like, "Guys, check." But I'm like, "But don't tell me if she
Don't tell
unfollowed me.
me.
Just let me know if she still does." Because like, I can't look. Like, I literally can't look. Like, I do not wanna know if she unfollowed me. And if she did, all due respect, like I would probably unfollow me too, but like I literally can't look. Like I refuse to check if she still follows me because it would be the most devastating because it was the happiest moment of my life when she followed me on Instagram. Like
That is an
truly.
amazing follow. Wow.
I'm obsessed with her. And I DM'd her whenever I was like going through my like struggles about perception with my book and she responded and it's like my phone screensaver is her like DM back
Holy
to me.
moly.
I'm
I feel like
obsessed.
I've DM'd her and gotten nothing. She one time liked something that I had on my gram, and that
Yeah.
was, like, one of the highlights of my life.
Yeah, no, it's really was out of body, like, I just DM'd her saying I listened to the podcast and, like, what she said, like, completely changed my perspective on writing my first book, and she responded and said, "Keep going, you can do it, dear heart, I know you can," and I was literally like, "I can do it, I'll be fine."
Aw.
But yeah, no, that
Like,
book is
Cheryl
like
Strayed said so.
yeah, I'm like, since she said it,
Yeah.
that book is, like, the best book. I gift it to
Yeah, I agree.
people. Whenever someone's going through something, I'll find, like, one of the columns that, like, really spoke to me and be like, "You have to read this." Devastating.
Absolutely. Yeah,
It's
it's
devastating.
beautiful book.
Well, can you tell everybody where they can find you, how they can get their hands on this new book, and what we should look out for? What's coming next?
Yeah, so the book is sold everywhere books are available, Target, Amazon, your local indie. Um, this episode will come out before the book comes out, right?
Tomorrow.
If
Yeah,
it
we're
yeah.
we're
So
pushing it for my
yeah.
air date.
So if you buy if you buy the book before it comes out, you also get a free journal. And this
Ooh.
journal is dope. I know it's good. Like I'd never know if
Uh,
I what I do is good. And I'm like, this is really good.
wait, no, I need the
Um,
journal
I will get you the journal.
because I feel like during Lily's, I was like, I need a journal for this.
And it's my life goal to write a real journal. But this was the like Random House was like, okay, you can write this journal. And I was like, oh my God, yes. So I've poured so much into this journal, but so you can get it for free. And the details of that are like all over my Instagram, which is like in the bio, which is just Tara Schuster. And if you want to like talk to me, it's the best way to reach me is through my newsletter, which is way more of a community. And that's just you go to my website, taraschuster.com, sign on up, and we'll start talking.
Well, thank you so much for doing this, for sharing with us. You're so smart. You're so lovely. Like, I am just so excited to read this book, and I can't wait for all the success to come.
Oh, you're so kind. And this is I'm almost like you came at the perfect moment. Today was a total nightmare. So to hear
Oh my
your
gosh.
ray of light, I'm so happy. So thank you.
Wait, I'm so glad I could share that with you. I know everyone's just going to be obsessed with this episode. I got so many DMs saying that your book is like my followers' Bible and you've like
Mm.
led them out of such dark times. So I think just being able to walk through the world knowing that like you even changed one person's life is so special and you're definitely doing that.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. And it changes my life because I feel less alone.
I
That's
love
like
it.
the beautiful thing is it's like a
Yeah.
never ending circle.
It's just like a beautiful circle of love.
Yeah. Yeah,
Well,
totally.
thank you so much and we will talk to you soon.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Bye guys.